I'm very happy to present to you Maya Bundt and Fabian Willi. Please come on stage. Maya Bundt is the president of the steering committee for the National Cyber Strategy. Before that, Maya was running or creating the cyber insurance program at Swiss Re. She quit that to become a professional board member and president of important committees. And her successor is Fabian Willi, who's still at Swiss Re, and he's still deep into the cyber insurance business, while Maya is now a much more distanced view in it. When I asked her to talk about it, she said, no, I need somebody who knows about this. I'm too far away already. So she's now the senior asking questions, and Fabian will ask questions, and the pro and con will run around, and I'm really interested in the new format.
Yeah, so thanks for having us. We thought we'd try something new. Please tell us afterwards whether it worked or whether it didn't work. So we are going to have different, kind of a little bit of a maybe controversial conversation up front here, hopefully. And later on, we will also are happy to discuss your questions. So we'll start. And I have this here that will kind of say when we are done with our first conversation. So let's start. So one argument that you always find in cyber insurance is that if you really need it, it won't pay. So when we think back, for example, to 2017, we had the NotPetya event. We had probably around 10 billion of losses worldwide. And we had several large companies who really were impacted deeply. They had losses of several hundred millions. One example was Mondelez. Merck was another name that was in the news. And then when they came to the cyber insurers and said, well, please pay my losses, the cyber insurers basically said, well, we have a war exclusion for this. We do not want to pay. Fabian, how does that work then?
Well, Maya, this is obviously a very important question, right? How does that work? And I would need to totally disagree with the fact which is stated on the background behind of us that cyber insurance wouldn't pay, right? And I think we need to look a little bit into the details, especially when it comes to key exclusions such as war. And it's very important to me that you in the audience understand that war is basically not an insurable concept, right? Because it has the potential to wipe out the entire capital base of the insurance industry. So war is by default excluded in many insurance products, and cyber is no different here. That means every modern cyber policy has a war exclusion, full stop, right? And I think people know that and should be aware about that. The other interesting fact is that basically the case you described between Merck and its insurers who dispute about the coverage in the policy was not about the cyber policy of Merck, it was about their property insurance policy. And that's a confusion we still see nowadays with many companies out there, that they believe that their traditional products, such as property insurance and liability insurance, need to cater for cyber risks as well, which is not the case. So they need to have dedicated cyber insurance, right? And why is this a great product? I believe it's very powerful because it basically addresses three main key needs a company might have. So as part of a cyber attack, it covers the loss to the company itself, be it business interruption or data restoration costs they have, but it also covers the liabilities of the company towards a third party. For example, in case of a data breach, right, they are liable for the data being stolen and compromised. And last but not least, the very important feature of cyber insurance is that it covers the costs for incident response services. So companies get access to IT forensics, to reputational support, and the cost associated with that goes into the cover, right? And I think the proof of the pudding eventually is that when we saw the ransomware trend hitting the industry, that cyber insurance would pay out tons and tons of losses to the insured, right? So they really didn't look great in the insurer's book of business in 2019 and 2020. So again, I truly believe that this product pays out a lot, not everything, but it's quite comprehensive.
But then we don't have to even go back to, 7 years or whatnot. The latest large event, the CrowdStrike event, right? I have just read numbers that stated that the economic loss is about 5.4 billion, and insurance is expected to pay out maybe 300 million, maybe a little bit more. How does that fit together? Because to me, that also sounds like if there is a really, if it's really needed, it's not there to cover it.
Yeah. Well, it's not unusual that the economic loss is much larger than the insured loss. This is true for any type of insurance product out there, as it is for cyber. And the reason why is very simply, and it's more pronounced even in cyber where the insurance penetration is very low, not every company has bought cyber insurance yet, right? So many companies will just need to sustain that with their own funds and money they have, right? Secondly, insurance also comes as a concept, right? It's predefined in terms of what it covers. And for example, with the CrowdStrike example you mentioned, we all know that was a system failure type of event, which is not by default included in cyber insurance policies, right? And the last thing is, insurance always comes with a limit and with retention. And by far, not every company buys enough limit to cover then all the losses they sustain, right? So there is a delta between what is an economic loss and what is an insured loss, right?
Yeah, but you just said system failure is not covered. So if I'm a business person, I buy an insurance program, I want to be secure then against these type of losses, and then I find out after the fact it's not covered.
Yeah, and I have a lot of understanding, obviously, if you are maybe not a well-educated insurance buyer, right? You buy cyber insurance and you think, it's sleep easy, everything which can happen, which has a digital somehow connect, is being covered. Typically, what cyber insurance covers is malicious attacks, right? But some very broad cyber products would also include the system failure aspect, right? But you need to pay in addition for it. It's an extension, and it's not yet in every product baked in. But this also shows that the cyber product evolves over time, responding to new threats and new needs of insureds. That's, again, why I believe it does a lot to help sustain a cyber crisis.
So basically what you're saying is it really pays out to read the fine print in the insurance policy. Exactly. I have lots of discussions. Oh, I think we are over time. Sorry, that has to go then into the question and answers. Thanks, Fabian.
Yep.
That was a good discussion to start with, but now comes the next one. Let's go. So, other discussions that I always have also in these kind of setups is cyber insurance actually fuels cybercrime. And the big question there is, does insurance pay the ransom in a ransomware case too easily? And I have, just when I did my research, I just went and looked at and could immediately find a quote, basically saying, our insurance company made the decision for us. That was in the US, a city that was ransomed. At the end of the day, it really boils down to a business decision on the insurance side of things, them looking at how much it is going to cost to fix it ourselves and how much is it going to cost to pay the ransom. So for me, that is now my basically question to you. Does insurance pay the ransom too easily?
No, technically it doesn't, right? And as often the devil lies in the details, right? So as a matter of fact, insurance companies, they do not interact with the ransomware gangs, right? Nor do they pay directly the ransomware groups for the ransom money demanded or asked. So the final decision lies always with the company, right? That's sort of the victim as part of the equation. Yet, clearly, the company is interested to understand if the cyber insurer would potentially reimburse the payment they made to the ransomware group, right? I think if they have cyber insurance, which includes ransom coverage, that's the question on the table. So insurers would not do that lightheartedly. Typically, they follow very strict processes, such as they would actually try first to mitigate the case by giving support to the company with incident response services. They try to get the data back from the backups if they are available and not encrypted. They do a lot of things to avoid paying, because paying is not what people want immediately, right? Also, what they would do, they bring in support specialists who are skilled in negotiating the ransom demand down to as well lower the eventual cost of that. But we need to be as well aware that the reality is that companies, they are very inclined to pay, and not the insurance companies, but the victims of the cyber attack or the ransomware attack, because it's about their well-being, right? It's about really them fighting for their existence. So if they have insurance or not, quite often they will actually pivot to the decision to pay that out if they cannot solve the issue themselves, right? And that's why I'm saying cyber crime and as well ransomware is here to stay, with or without cyber insurance, but I think cyber insurance can really contribute a lot in the time of a crisis and support the victims to get through that.
Okay, understood, but what do you say then to the voices that say, and I've read several articles to that effect, that the crime gangs actually look at who is insured, and then they would ransom for exactly that amount. Mm-hmm. So it's an easy kind of target.
Yeah, I have read that as well, Maya, and it would be obviously very nice, you know, to hack a cyber insurer, get the entire portfolio list, just look up the insureds, the companies, and then you have the perfect target list to go after them, because, you know, they have bought insurance, and insurance will or might reimburse the ransom money. As a matter of fact, I still believe it's much easier to breach the company directly than going after an insurer who probably comes with extra protection in terms of cybersecurity. But also, I mean, it's not a secret anymore. Literally every cyber insurance policy today has that option of covering the ransom payment. So it's public knowledge. You don't need to find that in the database, in the systems of the insurer. And then it would also be a bit complicated, because companies, they buy cyber limits with many insurers, so literally would need to hack like maybe 10 or 15 of them to get the full picture to see how much they have, right? I think the last point I'd like to say, those ransomware gangs are also super clever. They usually tailor the money they demand as ransom payment to the financial strength of the company to optimize the chances that they pay. If they ask too much, they don't pay because they go out of business. So they don't even need to know how much insurance they have, because it's already somehow geared towards their financial strength, right?
But in general, we can agree that it's actually not a good idea to pay ransom to crime gangs, right?
There I fully agree with you, Maya. For once, I think by no means you should walk out here and think that this is a good idea. But let's watch out as well that we don't blame the victims or criminalize the victims, right? Again, if a company fights for survival, they might pay to stay in business.
That's
all right. Now, we swap sides.
We swap sides.
Yeah, because then I can ask the nasty questions for once. And here we go with one question or statement we also quite often hear in the industry, that basically cyber insurance carriers, they are not equipped, or they cannot really deal with cyber as systemic events. And one example which comes to my mind, if you compare it to natural catastrophes, which are confined by the law of physics, right? Cyber attacks, big events, they are not stopping at the geographical border. They would just spread globally, potentially. Think about WannaCry, right? Infecting more than 3,000 workstations in over 150 countries globally. So for me, this sounds like cyber Armageddon. Again, I believe there's no way insurers can deal with that.
Okay, thanks for that question, Fabian. I think here's two things that we need to look at. First one is the spreading and the diversification of risk, right? So it is clear, yes, cyber events can spread globally and quickly. We've seen that over and over again in the last few years. So in general, there is a potential for very large accumulation. However, Also in terms of cyber, there are some factors that prevent that accumulation. We have day and night. We've seen them with CrowdStrike. We have a learning effect. We have different technologies that different industries use, that different companies use, that different company sizes use. So to think that every single company in this world, every single organization is hit by an event at the same time is not really realistic. Now, if we are looking at the other side, at insurability in general, we have to look at the distribution of losses. And if you're looking at the tail end of that distribution, that is losses that happen very seldomly, but are very, very costly, right? That is what we are, the cyber catastrophe, the Cybergeddon, what you were mentioning. We have different scenarios that could lead to that. And in general, the insurance industry has not been too bad in covering, as you said earlier, in covering losses. However, there are some events that are outside of the insurer's risk appetite. That has to be accepted as well, because insurers are private entities, and they can define their risk appetite as well as any company out there that buys insurance, or that are against general policy. And for these events that are actually not really insurable by the private sectors, there are mechanisms in place for other risks, public-private partnerships mostly, that can help make these risks insurable. I'm thinking about nuclear risk, I'm thinking about terrorism risk, I'm thinking about flood risks. For all these risks, all huge and accumulating events, there are public-private partnerships in place in the different countries to cover these events. And we could imagine a world where we would build up something for a large cyber catastrophe. However, that would have to be done actually before the event happens, the really big event happens. And I do not see at this point in time, a bit pessimistic here, that we get that done before something really big happens. We are not so good at that as we've seen with COVID and others.
Okay, so I get that, Maya, listening to you. The insurance industry, they can actually cover some of those big events, the systemic risks. Some few might need other solutions. But now if I look at the cyber market today and think about insurance penetration, especially for the smaller companies in the SME segment, which is roughly around 10% these days, just imagine more and more SMEs would buy cyber insurance over time. Wouldn't that become too big of a portfolio of an exposure for the entire industry? Mm-hmm. Is that something we can insure at all?
Yeah, so what's the current premium volume is about $15 billion on the worldwide cyber insurance market. If you look at the exposure, what the insurance is exposed against, that's manifold that, right? So it's a huge amount already now. If you imagine, as we discussed earlier, all those companies and all those organizations being hit by the same time, the insurance industry as a whole would have a big problem. Mm-hmm. So what do the insurance companies do? They manage their own exposure, right? They decide how much risks do we want to take onto our books. They reinsure themselves for the big events, and they try to help their insureds, policyholders, to not be a victim, right? I think that is the positive effect of that for the insureds as well. Try to actively manage. We've seen that in other lines of business as well, where it's working very well. I think for cyber has the capacity for that too.
Very good. And with that, we have almost a point landing, and we go to our very last provocative statement here, which is basically, I think every company at the end of the day should buy and have cyber insurance. And the reason why I think that, Allianz does that yearly risk barometer where they ask the companies out there, what's your top number one risks? And cyber always ranks first as well in 2024. The new thing is now it ranks first or top for every type of company out there, for the small ones, for the middle ones, and for the big ones, right? So isn't that a clear sign and call for every company needs to buy cyber insurance?
Tja, I don't know about that. Because what insurance is part of the risk management process, right? It is not the risk management process, and you can't just buy insurance. Actually, what you need to do is you need to understand your risks, and then you can decide how much of these risks do you want to avoid, how much of these risks do you want to mitigate with all the cybersecurity measures in place and controls, how much of the risk do you want to accept as a company, and then the difference is what you potentially want to transfer on the insurance market. So if you have not done all of these steps, you can actually not say whether you need to be insured at all.
It's a fair point, right? I think there is also other means to reduce your risk, right? Not only via insurance, and security is a big part of that equation. Now, I looked as well up some big numbers. I wanted to have one as well for today. So what I found is that the global cost of cybercrime expected for 2025 amounts to roughly 10.5 trillion. I don't even know how many zeros that are. So again, for me, very clear, many businesses will go out of business, they will go bust. Hence, again, they should buy cyber insurance.
So thanks for those numbers. What I always say, managing cyber risk nowadays has become part of the cost of doing businesses. So it doesn't matter whether you're a large company, a small company, a financial services company, a pharma company, everybody, you need to manage those risks, digital risks and cyber risks. And then, as I said earlier, you need to understand how's your business model working and where do you have those exposures, where do you have the risks? And then go through the risk management process to decide, okay, this is our appetite, we might want to buy some cyber insurance, transfer part of that, but other companies might decide, no, we want to self-insure. I have had discussions with many companies who said, we self-insure. It doesn't, for us it doesn't really make sense. Cost-benefit calculation doesn't make sense. We don't have to buy cyber insurance. Or your business model is as such that there's not the kind of matching product out, although you've said cyber product is relatively broad. Depending on how you are set up, it might not fit your needs. So you have to look at also, is the product out there that actually covers what I need covered, right? And last but not least, you can make the decision, well, I don't want to invest now into a cyber insurance policy. I want to invest that money rather into some additional cybersecurity measures. So I think all of those are very valid points. It's just important that companies have that discussion and take an informed decision.
Yeah, no, I do agree, and I think the last thing I'd like to ask you, Maya, because I truly believe that over the last few years, cyber insurance acted as well as a catalyst to boost cybersecurity with many companies, make them more resilient against cyber attacks. So again, for me, reflecting on that, I would even think cyber insurance should become a mandatory product for all companies out there.
So I'm not so sure about the mandatory part. I'm not a fan of mandatory schemes. However, I do agree with you, and that's nice to finalize on an agreement. I do agree with you on the cyber insurance contributing to an actually better cybersecurity maturity for some companies. And I can give you an example. I've had discussions with small and medium-sized enterprises who actually got their act together and invested into cybersecurity, into cybersecurity staff, into cybersecurity measures, because they wanted to buy insurance. And the insurance asked for certain base requirements. And in that case, those companies actually took that as a quasi-standard. Whether that's good or not is to be here, but they definitely looked at, what do I need, what do I have to do, and in that process, they started a process to becoming more cyber secure and more cyber resilient. So overall, I think that's a good thing. It has been a thing of the last maybe 3 years when the cyber insurance market hardened. In the old times, maybe 10 years ago, we had that discussion as well. But then there was so much cheap capacity in the cyber insurance market that basically the requirements of the insurers were not up to that standard. So I think now I would full-heartedly agree with you, and let's see how that develops further.
All right. Thanks, Maya. So always good to agree.
Not yet.
And I hope you enjoyed the debate as well. We wanted to give you as well a bit of more content when it comes to cyber insurance, and as somehow take-home messages that are our key points we discussed today. I think cyber insurance, as we saw, pays a lot. It pays not everything, but it pays for actually the intended coverage, right? Very important takeaway here. And secondly, cybercrime exists, unfortunately, and is here to stay. But cyber insurance has an important role to play as well to support victims as part of a cyber attack.
Mm-hmm. And the last 2 points, yes, we also discussed systemic risks. Insurance can deal with systemic risks, but only to a certain extent. So if we want to kind of tackle the boundaries of insurability, we need to think about additional mechanisms. And the last point, every company needs to decide themselves whether they actually need cyber insurance, whether they want cyber insurance, and whether they are going to buy cyber insurance. And with this, I think we are open for questions.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, great talk. Thank you, guys. Really enjoyed it. 2 questions, hopefully not complicated. First one, how do you do the controlling of those companies, the cybersecurity controlling of those companies you insure and to whom you require them to implement cybersecurity measures? That's the first question. The second one is, if I was an attacker and I wanted to literally tackle into companies that have the concern, the real concern, to the point that they do acquire an insurance, then what I would do is I would first hack you guys, get the big accounts, and then pursue those guys. So the question is, have you had those sort of like scenarios wherein there's a long tail that starts with you down the road towards the actual final end customer or customers?
So let's start with the first question. That was on how do you control the cybersecurity of insureds if they want to buy a cyber insurance, if I understand correctly. So mostly there is a self-declaration, as with other insurances as well. So you get a questionnaire. We had the question this morning, who likes cyber questionnaire? That's another cyber questionnaire, actually, from the insurance, where you then have to declare how you are set up. And you need to declare that honestly, because if you do not declare it honestly, you might forfeit your insurance cover, right? For larger risks, there's typically a more in-depth discussion, right? There is a risk dialogue where the potential insured, the company who wants to buy the cyber insurance, invites the insurance panel. Often that is like 10 insurers that come. And they come and they have an in-depth discussion with the CISO, with the management, with people on the ground as to how they are set up and basically how are they protected against cyber events. And then the insurers can make their informed decision whether they want to insure that risk or not.
Okay, so there is an initial assessment, but there's no follow-up controlling, actually.
There is usually a time of renewal. You know, most insurance policies run for a year, and then at time of renewal, there is a reassessment typically. Also, if there is something that really has material changes, for example, you buy another company, right? You're a company, you're a cyber insurer, and then you have an M&A transaction and you buy something. You would have to go to your insurer, disclose this, and have a discussion on it.
And maybe to add on that, right, I think we also evolved with technology. So modern cyber insurers, they would actually real-time scan companies they have insured, right, to see inside out and outside in what's happening in their cohort of insured companies and give that information back again. It's some sort of like managed security type of setting, right, where you want to as well see what happens throughout the lifespan of a cyber insurance policy. Still, conditions of the insurance policy will apply as they were agreed on day one, but you see how the risk might change or not, right? I think that's probably a bit the future where cyber insurance will go to. Some first insurers have already started to do that. And you had a second part of the question, or second question, right? Was this about if cyber insurers getting attacked and then having, you maybe need to rephrase it again, sorry.
Yeah, so essentially I'm just wondering if you could disclose or speak about any cases wherein attackers started their process by first understanding your customer database, identifying big accounts, and then pursuing things down the road, because those ones are likely the ones paying for insurance, likely the one most interested in not getting actually attacked.
Yeah, no, at least myself, I'm not aware of a concrete case where this was really happening. Again, I think it's much harder to breach an insurance company which has a lot of protection in place. You know, they're also regulated as an entity. They need to follow some data protection laws and regulations very, very consistently and strictly. So I think it's much easier if you go after the companies who, on average, have lower cybersecurity hygiene in place than maybe the insurance or the financial services sector, which has invested a lot. So I think this is how I see it, yeah? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe to add to that, what we've seen is in terms of supply chain attacks is IT companies being hacked rather than insurance companies being hacked, right? Because then you have a direct link into others, and it goes, if you hack the insurance company, yes, you can get potentially some policy information, but I don't think that that is as helpful as, you know, basically having a super spreader right at your hands, if that answers your question.
Let's take one final question from Serge.
Thanks a lot for a really interesting panel. You talked a lot about kind of risk analysis, accepting risks, and people have to make up their minds. But it seems to me that especially in cyber, we find it all very, very hard to assess the risks. Like even very mature organizations have a hard time assessing their cyber risk. We're much better with fire risks, with car accidents. Small and medium enterprises, my feeling is they're out in the dark. They have no idea, not because they're stupid or anything, just because it's a mess. How can we deal with this? What would be approaches to kind of get a grip on these risks that are really hard to assess for the people that are at risk?
I can
start you and I
start.
will.
Yeah. So thanks, Serge. Very valid question, and somehow a question which bothers me in my day-to-day business as well, right? And I think the more complex a company is, the more sophisticated typically a company might as well be when it comes to cybersecurity. So they have in-house expertise, they might have a CISO, a SOC, whatever, right? They have budgets, resources to deal with cybersecurity. So there, the assessment, obviously, you speak to professionals who speak the same language, and the assessment is much easier, right? Still, the complexity of the operation might be the challenge there, to oversee maybe an international global company with many different locations and servers all around the globe. When it comes to SMEs and smaller companies, we need to acknowledge that they don't have the same budgets and expertise. Some of them, they might just start in cybersecurity day one, unfortunately, right? Even if we want them to be much more advanced. Yet, we need to find a way, I believe, to as well equip them with insurance, but also in a first step to help them go the next step in terms of cybersecurity, right? So there's a lot of dialogue happening and a lot of education, and typically what happens there is you try to, again, use technology, so to scan maybe the digital footprint of the company, what you can see in the open web to get at least a data point. You will also go to them, and the traditional questionnaire, as we heard, is still something they need to fill out. But it's all about the dialogue, right? If they don't understand the questions you ask them because they are too technical, you will not get the answers. So I think we have a role to play here as well as an industry, where we need to make that process of getting insurance and doing the assessment somehow transformed into a language which resonates with non-educated buyers, right? A lot of projects going on, a lot of ideas, but this is the nut to crack, absolutely, right?
Can I add to that,
Yes.
Fabian, from a more company perspective? And I've seen that one-on-one, right, with companies that I'm close to, small companies. It's not easy. It's hard to understand, but you can't get around it, right? So it starts with awareness. And although we have invested so hard into awareness campaigns, awareness here, awareness there, I don't have to preach to this audience here, but there are a lot of company leaders out there, board members, CEOs, C-suite, that are not aware of the risks. So there is no way around doing the hard work, and it takes years, right? Because then you understand, oh, I need to do something. And then you maybe the next year have the budget, in the budget, a position for a security person. Once that security person is there, you find out it's not the right person. So you have to rehire, half a year is gone, right? And then that security person does an analysis, hopefully with a external assessment, and then the company thinks, oh my goodness, there is such a big gap that we need to close. So that's usually, I've seen that several times, the process that runs. Those companies will invest bit by bit into their security, yes, but it takes a lot of time, and it always starts with the awareness that in today's world, every business model is digitally supported, is supported by data, by systems, and if something goes wrong, something is really wrong in the business. It's a business risk. So, understandable. I think we should, if you're asking for solutions, should continue with the awareness campaigns, and we need to make sure that we develop the skills for all those future leaders, that they understand data, that they understand risks, that they understand the environment, and come into these positions of power with the knowledge and the foresight to do something about it. It's a long-term strategy.
Very well. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Chocolate for you.
Dankeschön.
Thank you, Fabian.
Jetzt müssen wir unsere
Very well.